how have you been doing, really? Another way I could ask this is, how's your heart? Mine has been broken time and time again during this Trump administration, and that's okay. I would rather have a broken heart every day than not have a heart at all and be okay with what's been going on a daily basis. And maybe it's the same for you, or maybe not, or maybe for different reasons. There are plenty to choose from after all. Right, over the past month, we've set a pretty dangerous precedent by kidnapping a foreign president. We've talked about invading or taking Greenland by force from our allies, the Danes, which in turn has forced our NATO allies to reassess the relationship with the U.S. And inside the U.S., ICE agents have murdered 2 American civilians, and now with the release of the latest Epstein files, we can say that a huge portion of the most wealthy and powerful among us were involved in the dehumanization of the weakest and smallest, and that most likely none of these perpetrators are going to face any type of legal consequence. It's a lot, right? It's heavy, it's chaotic, it's heartbreaking. And I get how it can be quite discouraging when every day of this administration feels like an assault on your values, or an assault on the people, the institutions, and all else that you hold dear on this good earth, and that no one seems to be willing or able to stop it, right? You might be thinking, what can man do against such reckless hate? And I think it's a valid question. And even though the response will be different depending on the situation, the underlying answer is always going to be the same. It's going to require courage. Courage will now be the best defense against the storm that is at hand. That, and such hope as I bring. And I know, it can sound silly to quote or bring in The Lord of the Rings at a time like this. But for me, it is the great story, the one that really mattered, for 2 reasons. First, it's where I got a lot of my values from growing up. And values are always worth fighting for. And second, it's been the one story that never failed to encourage or give me hope whenever I return to it. So when I returned to the Fellowship of the Ring the other day, there was a line that hit me deeper than any other did for a long time. And for context, the company just lost Gandalf. And maybe you know what that's like, losing a mentor, someone you trusted, or a guide. It can be devastating. And one of the guys on the team, Gimli, just found out that his entire people in their country are no more. And he's told, do not let the great emptiness of your homeland fill your heart. For the world has grown full of peril, and on all lands, love is now mingled with grief. And that's where I am, and maybe you are too, right? Caught somewhere between grieving a land I loved and still loving a land I now grieve. It doesn't have to be a land, it can be a person as well. Maybe someone you grew up with, but who has grown cold. In either case, they're still here and they haven't necessarily gone all bad, but seemingly they're gone for good. If that resonates with you, you are in good company here. And the nice thing about company, as the line continues, hope remains while company is true. And this is the purpose of the video, to give you some measure of hope and some measurable steps you can take, not based on fantasy or wishful thinking, but on the same truth and wisdom found in the Lord of the Rings that I found in the Stoics, which I find particularly useful during hard times. The reason I love the Lord of the Rings is because of its values, and at the core of those values lies courage, doing what you know to be right, especially in the face of danger, difficulty, or death. And there's something that I've always loved about the word courage itself. It comes from the old French, courage, and it means from the heart. And so I like to think that the characters of the Lord of the Rings are not just great because they are courageous, but because of their greatheartedness. They are brave and strong, but they are not afraid to be tender. They are honorable even in defeat, and in victory, they show mercy and restraint to those who don't deserve it. They look after each other, and they don't look down on the smallest or weakest among them. And these are people from different backgrounds and different races, often with decades of distrust and competing interests. But they are courageous enough to bond together and come to each other's aid during dark times. And as a side note, this always really resonated with me. I grew up as an American, but I did so abroad. And I always felt humbled when I saw American flags flying next to Allied ones over cemeteries in Europe, or at our memorials like the ones in Washington, D.C. I always felt a tremendous amount of gratitude seeing the flags or names of our allies and friends. I think it's the reason my favorite line of the trilogy was, "A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship, but it is not this day." That's why it certainly feels like this day has come every day since Trump took office, at least in Congress, the Supreme Court, and in our foreign policy. If you ask me to sum up in one word what the main theme of The Lord of the Rings is, I would say courage. And if you ask me to boil down what this Trump administration is all about, the one word I would use is cruelty. And to me, it seems as though this isn't as what some would call a necessary evil or a means to an end. It is an end in and of itself, being cruel and petty for the sake of it. And there's nothing really new or surprising about this mentality, right? It's always been the way of the tyrant. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. This was said 2,500 years ago by the Athenians during the Peloponnesian War, which pitted Athens against Sparta. But they said it to a weaker, neutral city-state right before they executed all the men and enslaved all the women and children. It's the same mentality of all these Epstein creeps, as well as all the goons inside the Trump administration. The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. It's the same mentality that the Roman general Pompey had when he brought his army to a Roman city and they told him that what he was doing was illegal. He replied, "Stop quoting laws to us. We carry swords." Now, these quotes might sound cool and make you look tough, but they're a cautionary tale. Athens lost the war, in part because of their act of cruelty, which encouraged other cities to join the Spartans, who then had the power to conquer the Athenians. And Pompey, well, if you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. He started a civil war, but ended up stabbed to death by his own allies after they switched sides. I find it interesting how the Roman philosopher Seneca would say later on, all cruelty stems from weakness. I would add to it that cruelty not only stems from weakness, but becomes one as well. There is nothing new under the sun, right? This mentality goes back millennia. What is new for me as an American is to see such a large part of my countrymen, friends, family, and the people of the faith I grew up in not care or even cheer in the face of such cruelty and the collapse of 80 years of American courage that made us the exception. And as difficult as it is, maybe it's not a bad thing to realize that we are not the exception anymore, if we ever were one. In any case, I often think about the exchange Gandalf has with Frodo in that dark cave, right? When Frodo says, "I wish none of this had happened." And man, do I feel like that a lot of times. And maybe you do as well. And there's something about Gandalf's reply. Rings truly stoic to me, right? He doesn't fix or change the situation, but he does change the mindset. So do all who live to see such times. But that is not for us to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. I find this wisdom from Gandalf to be very similar to the type that Seneca offers in a letter he is addressing for a situation that sounds very similar to our own. He says, "The spirit must be trained to realization and an acceptance of its lot. It must come to see that there is nothing fortune will shrink from, and that these things are the same for everyone, equally difficult for all. But anyone who likes can make it easier for himself by viewing them with equanimity or a calm mind." The following quotes are from Seneca's Letter 91, and I encourage you to read the whole thing, and I'll put a link to a free version. He's writing about a friend's grief after his city of Lyon was completely destroyed in one night by a fire. tell me if this doesn't resonate with us right now. The growth of things are a tardy process, and their undoing is a rapid matter. An hour, an instant of time suffices for the overthrow of empires. In the middle of peace, war rears its head, and the foundations of our security are transformed into a source of alarm. Friend turning foe, an ally turning enemy. How many of us feel this way? And it applies in different settings, right? Maybe the government that was set up to protect you is turning into something you feel you need to protect yourself from. Think of it from the point of view of a NATO ally, like Denmark or the Canadians, or the Europeans in general, and the Ukrainians in particular, where the U.S. was always seen as a reliable ally, now turning into somewhat of an unpredictable threat. Think of it on a smaller personal level. Friend turning foe. I have lost some friendships and family relationships over this, over incompatible or betrayed values. And I think this next quote really encapsulates our situation best. Seneca says, "Misfortune may snatch you away from your country, or your country away from you." Now the ice raids obviously come to mind, right? People who grew up or spent years or a lifetime in the U.S. being snatched away, and in some cases U.S. citizens being snatched away and deported out of the country. Now that's a minority of people, but for, I would say, a large percent of us, it does feel like our country has been snatched away from us. Now, a word of caution for us. Even though I think they were wrong, that last part, right, the feeling that their country had been snatched away from them, is the sense of grievance or resentment that a lot of Republicans and Trump supporters felt under the Obama and Biden administrations. And that's what's fueling this. Right? MAGA is an attempt to bring America back to something it never was by bringing down the very principles and values it always claimed to have. That's why I find Seneca's take on this very interesting. He says, all the works of mortal man lie under the sentence of mortality. We live among things destined to perish. And there's no ground for resentment in all of this. We've entered into a world in which these are the terms life is lived on. If you're satisfied, submit to them. If not, get out whatever way you please. Now, for context, Seneca is talking about getting out of life by taking his own. And that is ultimately how he went out when the tyrannical emperor Nero sentenced him to death. Seneca ends this letter by saying, "No one has power over us when death is within our power." Now, I am not advocating for taking anyone's life, especially not your own. I think it's a bit extreme and, quite frankly, unnecessary, given the willingness of some of these ICE agents to do it for you. But there is no doubt, facing death can be an act of courage, but it is not the only one. In another letter, Seneca will say, sometimes even to live is an act of courage. Get out whatever way you please. For some, it might mean getting out of that comfort zone and having that uncomfortable conversation with that friend, family member, or neighbor. Maybe you need to get out of town, right? Or find a different one, a different community, a different country. Maybe you need to get out and protest. It may not seem like a lot, but neither is 3.5%. Historically, that is the percentage needed of a population participating in peaceful protests to change the course of a government, or, of course, change the government. Whatever way you please, I would encourage you to get out and vote these midterm elections, in every election going forward, provided we still have them, right? Maybe get out and run for office, or get your wallet out for those who are. There are other forces at work in this world besides the will of evil, and you can be one of them. And that is an encouraging thought. All cruelty stems from weakness. And the Trump administration is no exception. Even though Donald Trump has accumulated vast amounts of power, that does not make him strong, let alone invulnerable. Seneca says, nothing is durable. Whether for an individual or for society, the destinies of men and cities alike sweep onwards. someday, Donald Trump's time, his administration, its cruelty, and his goons will come to pass. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean things will go back to the way they were, and I'm not sure that they should, or that things will be better. But consider how Seneca ends this passage. A setback has often cleared the way for greater prosperity. Many things have fallen, only to rise to more exalted heights. In the city of Lyon, one may presume that everyone will endeavor to make the work of restoration a greater, more noble achievement than what they have lost. May that work be of lasting duration. Everyone will endeavor. I think that's the key here. If we all work and participate in the restoration of our republic, we stand the chance of building a better one, dare I say, a great one. And I have been to Lyon, and I can attest that it is indeed a great and noble city. So take heart. It is not this day, but a day may come when the courage of men prevails. Until then, courage for our friends. Get out there and keep fighting, because despite everything, there's still some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for.